Enough already. You keep leaving your infant with us almost every day. Both Mom and I are really inconvenienced by this. I was bewildered by the sudden angry call from my sister-in-law. What are you talking about? My remark only infuriated her more. Playing dumb, are you? You're unfit to be a mother if you can't even take care of your own baby. This was a completely unfamiliar story to me. After all, I don't even have an infant. Are you mistaken? I've never left my child with you, and my daughter is already 3 years old. Our assertions were not aligning, and my sister-in-law's irritation was palpable. However, my statement seemed to make her realize something was amiss. What do you mean? This wasn't a simple misunderstanding by my sister-in-law. In fact, it was all a calculated scheme by someone else, and she had been deceived too. Then who is that baby? Someone had concocted a series of lies, crafting a perfect scenario. But this call from my sister-in-law began unraveling the lies one after another. The meticulously planned deception fell apart, and the final chapter of the plot turned out to be an irony beyond anyone's imagination. My name is Haley. By day, I'm a salesperson at a major bank, busy with client visits. After work, I rush to the daycare where my 3-year-old daughter, Mabel, waits. Sorry to keep you waiting, Mabel. My daughter runs towards me with a big smile. It's the moment my day's fatigue vanishes. Here, I switch from a salesperson to a mother. It's the start of my mom's duties. After getting home with my daughter, we have dinner, prepare for the next day, and take a shower. Then, I put her to bed, marking the end of my day. This is my daily routine. My husband, Luke, is busy with work and often comes home late. Thus, household and childcare duties are left to me. My husband and I met through work. He was the polite staff member at the company I visited for sales. His company is a small to mid-sized one, but fairly well known, with increasing sales. Our relationship deepened over several meetings, eventually leading to dating. At that time, I was 36, and he was 30. He's very kind and gentle, and I felt comfortable around him, which made me think about marriage. Then, a joyous event occurred. I was pregnant with our child. Of course, Luke was overjoyed, and we quickly got married. We vowed to share both joys and sorrows, building a happy family together. However, the reality of married life was far from my ideal. Haley, you left the laundry overnight again? Stains and odors can settle in. It's important for a businessman to make a good impression. Don't you want your husband to always wear clean shirts? We chose an apartment near my in-laws at my husband's request. But it turned out to be a hellish choice for me. After marriage, I realized that my husband hadn't separated from his mother. He was a so-called mama's boy. He spoke to his mother on the phone almost every day, neglecting the time he should have been spending with me. To my astonishment, most of their conversations were complaints about me. After hearing from Luke, his mother would come over early in the morning to lecture me. I'm doing the laundry now. I couldn't move last night due to severe morning sickness. I know how important it is for a businessman to be clean. I wasn't being lazy. During my pregnancy, the persistent morning sickness sometimes made me leave work early or take a day off. Then the next morning, I'd hear, how nice it must be to sleep all day while skipping work. If you're taking a day off, at least finish the household chores perfectly. Luke is working hard while you're sleeping. At least make dinner for him. I wonder why she can't understand my condition, despite having been pregnant and giving birth herself. Unable to eat properly and exhausted physically and mentally, she relentlessly pressed on me. Pregnancy isn't a sickness. Don't be so soft. Am I the one who's wrong? I can't tell anymore what's right and what's wrong. I was too exhausted to even think about it. Of course, pregnant women with big bellies feel tired. If you can't handle that, you're not cut out to be a mother. My mother-in-law's criticism never stops. You're already 37, aren't you? It's one thing for a younger daughter-in-law, but at your age, you shouldn't be whining. I never complained to my husband or mother-in-law. Yet, she always finds a way to throw a jab at me. Would have been better if you were younger. She clearly dislikes the fact that I'm older than my husband. I can't change my age. But I can change the environment. Maybe once the baby is born, she'll change her mind and accept me. I was hoping that a good relationship could be built through the baby. Half a year later, I safely gave birth to my daughter. However, my mother-in-law showed no interest in her. While I was on maternity leave, struggling with new motherhood, my mother-in-law and husband went out frequently together. When my husband came home and saw the messy house, he reported back to her. Then she'd come over, screaming at me. This was my daily life. My husband's attachment to his mother grew stronger after our daughter was born. He probably couldn't accept becoming a father. And he probably still wanted to be his mother's boy. The same was true for her. Her son seemed to be her favorite. Their bond got stronger, and I was at my wit's end. When my daughter turned 1, she started daycare, and I returned to work. Around that time, my husband began coming home later and later. One day, I saw his pay slip. He's working so hard every day, staying late, but there's no overtime pay. What's going on? He would come home after midnight due to overtime. But his efforts weren't reflected in his salary, and I was puzzled. Well, we're a small business. Unlike big corporations, overtime is just part of the job. It's the same for most small businesses. My husband defended his company. But this is a violation of labor laws. It's too much. It's not just a few hours of overtime a month, this is extreme. Why not talk to your company? He turned red and raised his voice at me. You want me to get fired? Don't you dare do anything unnecessary. This was the first time he had raised his voice at me. I was shocked and couldn't find the words to respond. Why was he so protective of his company? There might be another reason. I had a hunch. Years passed, and now my daughter is 3. She's a bit asthmatic and visits the pediatrician, but otherwise, she's growing well. As usual, I was out on sales calls. Breathing out in the dry air, I could see my breath, a sign of winter's arrival. Then suddenly, my phone rang. It was from my daughter's daycare. I stopped on the sidewalk, my hands numb from the cold, and answered the phone. It sounded panicked. My daughter had a fever. She was so energetic this morning when I dropped her off at daycare. Maybe she caught a cold in this chilly weather. I cut my work short and hurried to the daycare. My daughter looked exhausted and was struggling to breathe. And when I picked her up, her body was alarmingly hot. Realizing this was serious, I immediately took her to the pediatrician. The doctor said her asthma had worsened, her blood oxygen was low, and she was in a dangerous state. She needed to be hospitalized immediately. I called my husband. Mabel's in the hospital? I can't make it, I'm swamped at work. You'll have to handle everything. But why does she have to be hospitalized? He didn't know our daughter had asthma. My husband, who never helped with childcare, didn't know anything about her. The answer was clear. He would use work as an excuse and leave it all to me. I just wanted my husband, as a father, to show some concern for our daughter, who was delirious with a high fever and struggling to breathe. As her mother, overwhelmed with worry, I wished for some support from my husband. Such a basic family picture seemed like a luxury to me. My daughter's symptoms had subsided with milk and medication, and she was sleeping. In the meantime, I hurried home to pack the necessities for her hospital stay. Then my phone rang. It was my mother-in-law. Why would she call at such a busy time? Maybe she heard about my daughter's hospitalization and wanted to help. Or was it another call filled with sarcasm? I answered the phone with trepidation. What are you thinking? Mabel's been hospitalized? And with severe asthma. She started berating me the moment I picked up. Just another call filled with sarcasm. Making your child develop asthma, it's your way of raising her that's the problem. You must be living in a filthy room, not cleaning properly. The air must be dirty too. No matter how much I tried to deny it, she didn't stop. If you had paid attention to her diet, this wouldn't have happened. You're probably feeding her food that causes asthma. And are you feeding Luke the same asthma-inducing meals in that dirty air? I won't let it go if something happens to Luke. I needed to head to the hospital where my daughter was waiting. I didn't have time for such pointless lectures. What did she mean by asthma meals? It's one thing to belittle people, but this is too much. I'm heading to the hospital now, so I have to go. I ended the call forcefully, sure she was fuming on the other end. But I had reached my limit. Mabel is one thing, but what does she mean by that? Does she not care if her granddaughter is suffering? Anger bubbled inside me, and my hands were shaking as I gripped my phone. I called my husband impulsively. I was about to get busy with hospital visits and home care. If he wasn't going to help, I wished he wouldn't call. I wanted him to tell his mother to stop interfering. And I wanted my husband to understand my struggles. Don't talk to me about that. Mom's right, isn't she? You've been neglecting your household duties, using work as an excuse. It's your lack of management that caused Mabel's condition. Instead of understanding, he lectured me too. I'm not neglecting anything. I might not be able to do everything, but I'm managing the basics. I had no allies. Then talking like this is just a waste of time. I was wrong to expect even a little understanding from him. I hung up, feeling hopeless. Tears wouldn't stop. I took leave from work during Mabel's hospitalization to focus on caring for her and the household. I had almost no time to rest, constantly traveling between the hospital and home. Meanwhile, Luke was still coming home late, leaving dirty laundry and trash everywhere. The table was littered with supermarket receipts and used tissues. Breakfast was left as it was. He had no intention of helping me. I cleaned up after him every day, feeling helpless. One day, while cleaning at home, my mother-in-law showed up suddenly. The other day, you left the laundry hanging on the balcony and didn't bring it in. Luke's shirt was damp all night because of that. So, Luke had been bad-mouthing me again. That day I stayed overnight at the hospital and couldn't return home. Couldn't Luke have brought in the laundry himself? And the orange juice in the fridge is expired. That's Luke's favorite juice. You should manage it properly and buy fresh juice. Well, if he likes it so much, he should finish it before it expires. He can buy his own juice. Neglecting household chores because you're caring for the sick won't do. You can leave Mabel to the hospital. Luke is working hard. Don't you think about supporting your husband more? You're really a hopeless wife. I was utterly exhausted. No matter what my mother-in-law said, my heart was so numb that I felt nothing. Mabel is only 3 years old. There's only so much she can do by herself. Luke is 34. He should be able to think and act for himself. If you're still worried, why don't you take care of everything for him? I finally let my inner thoughts slip out. What? What did you just say? Fortunately, my voice was soft enough that my mother-in-law didn't quite catch it. Don't mumble. If you have something to say it clearly. Her loud voice was piercing, and I turned my back on her. I'm off to the hospital now, so I'll have to go. Please buy the orange juice for him. With that, I left the house. My mother-in-law was still saying something. But I closed the door without looking back. Please, I just want her to stop bothering me. I was at my limit with exhaustion and stress. Still, I hurried to the hospital where my daughter was waiting. During Mabel's hospital stay, neither my husband nor my mother-in-law came to visit, not even once. I had asked Luke several times, hoping he would come, but he always refused, citing work. Mabel had fully recovered and was discharged from the hospital after a few weeks. She needed a few days of rest at home. I felt a little relieved as her condition stabilized. Luke continued to come home late, showing no concern for Mabel. Our conversations as a couple gradually decreased. She's discharged now, isn't she? Even a terrible wife like you should be able to manage household chores perfectly now. If not, you're a complete failure as a wife. My mother-in-law called me almost every day, busy with taking care of Mabel and housework. She never offered to help or even asked about Mabel's condition. She called only to make sarcastic remarks. You really are a terrible wife. That's why I dislike older women. Lately, it's been less about housework and more personal criticism. My mother-in-law probably just wanted an excuse to criticize me. Being called a terrible wife every day, I even started to feel mentally drained. One day, I talked to Luke about it. "You're called that because you are a bad wife. If you don't want to hear it, try harder." As expected, he sided with his mother. "Don't come to me with that. I'm tired. You being like this is also why you're a bad wife. Take better care of your husband. And not getting along with mom is a failure in itself. You're making such a kind mother angry every day. Look at yourself. You're really hopeless." Instead of support, I received more criticism. I regretted talking to Luke and left the room. I decided not to rely on anyone anymore. After that, Luke and I stopped talking. His return home got even later, and we hardly spent any time together. He even started staying out overnight. Sometimes for consecutive nights. When he did come home, he just dropped his dirty clothes on the floor, packed fresh ones in his bag, and left. Maybe this was all for work. But I couldn't believe that anymore. My mother-in-law's sarcastic calls continued. "A woman who's just old and can't provide proper education is far worse than a young woman from a proper family." Lately, my mother-in-law's sarcasm hinted at the presence of another woman. I didn't need her to tell me. I wasn't oblivious. During Mabel's hospital stay, while cleaning up scattered receipts on the table, I happened to see one. It was for women's stockings and underwear. Purchases he couldn't have made if he was working overtime. On my way back from the hospital, I bumped into Luke's boss. I had met his boss several times when I visited Luke's company for sales. His boss even gave a speech at our wedding and had been kind to both of us. "Our company is famous for being with no overtime. We even turn off the lights in the office at the end of the day." His words shocked me. Luke had been lying to me, spending his nights with another woman. His infidelity was obvious. I had been struggling alone. Should I endure it for Mabel's sake, or should I just get a divorce? But I couldn't come to a decision. One day, I received a call from an unknown number. Who could it be? Because of the daily calls from my mother-in-law, I had become sensitive to the phone ringing. I hesitantly answered the phone. It was Luke's younger sister. She's 5 years younger than Luke, living with their parents. We hardly ever met, our interactions limited to about once a year. She was busy with her own work and had a fulfilling personal life. "Enough is enough. Why do you keep leaving an infant at our house every day? Both mom and I are so inconvenienced." I was taken aback by my sister-in-law's sudden outburst. "What? What are you talking about?" My bewildered response only infuriated her more. "What do you mean what? Are you pretending not to know? A mother who can't even take care of her own baby is a failure." This accusation was completely unfamiliar to me. I don't even have an infant. I've never left such a child with anyone. I've always taken care of my daughter alone. I was confused. I took a moment to calm my thoughts. "Aren't you mistaken? I've never left my child with you, and my daughter is already 3 years old. I don't have an infant." Our claims didn't align, and my sister-in-law grew more frustrated. But my words seemed to make her realize something was amiss. She took a deep breath and tried to organize her thoughts. "What do you mean? I was told it's your baby. Mom and I are exhausted from taking care of the baby every day. If it's not your baby, then whose baby is it?" I had no idea. Who was this child that my sister-in-law and mother-in-law were looking after? "I don't know, but who told you that and brought that baby to you?" My sister-in-law, confused, answered. "It's Luke. He brings the baby, saying Haley asked him to." I never said anything like that. And what about my mother-in-law? She should know our daughter is Mabel. Why would she accept this mysterious infant? Is there some reason they are caring for this baby? Or is their inexplicable behavior giving me a bad feeling? We should find out who this baby is. My sister-in-law on the phone agreed. A few days later, I visited my in-laws' house. "Luke just brought the baby. He's here now." My sister-in-law whispered this to me quietly as she opened the front door. I nodded and entered the house silently. Laughter from Luke and my mother-in-law could be heard from the living room. They must be playing with the infant. I peeked through the door gap. Luke was cooing at the baby in a high-pitched voice, his expression eerily calm. He had never spoken to our daughter like that. I was stunned. This was really happening. I had evidence, but part of me didn't want to accept it. Luke's affair. But I couldn't look away from the reality in front of me any longer. Okay, Daddy's going to work now. Be a good baby, Luke said, standing up and walking out of the living room with a smile. Huh? Then he saw me in the hallway. His eyes widened, and his face changed color dramatically. He was speechless at the unexpected encounter. Frozen in place. Luke, what's wrong? My mother-in-law asked, approaching with the baby in her arms. And peeking out from behind Luke. Why are you here? She was shocked and seemed confused when she saw me. She desperately tried to hide the baby. So, you neglect our family and happily spend time with your mistress's baby. I had endured and turned a blind eye to Luke's infidelity until now. But with this, all the pieces fell into place. It was time to confront these two. The baby of his mistress? How dare you say that? Apologize now. My mother-in-law retorted, taking over for my visibly nervous husband. The rude one is you. You've been mocking me all this time. There's no way you didn't know anything. Then I turned to my husband. Must have been fun to cheat with such a young woman, right? I said, scattering dozens of photos on the floor. What is this? My sister-in-law was stunned looking at the photos. All of them showed my husband with a young woman. There were photos of them entering a motel arm in arm and others of the woman holding an infant. Walking around town with the two of them. Of course, that infant was the same one they lied about, claiming it was mine and leaving at my in-laws' house. This baby, is it with your mistress? That's the worst. What are you doing? My husband was frozen like a deer in headlights. Sweat trickling down his face. No use making excuses. I've investigated everything. I shoved the investigative report from the detective agency of my husband. The woman was the daughter of a client of his, and he had been involved with her since she gave birth to the child. All his late nights at work were a lie. He finished work at his usual time and headed straight to her house. You're truly despicable. What were you planning to do from here? My husband finally spoke, trembling. The woman's pregnancy had been an unexpected situation. He had hidden the fact that he had a wife and child, so she believed he was single. When she got pregnant, she pressed for marriage, and he was at a loss. Eventually, he couldn't handle it alone and confided in my mother-in-law. At first, she was shocked and scolded him. However, she quickly took a liking to the young woman, a president's daughter, and encouraged him to divorce me and marry her instead. But he couldn't marry her immediately because he was already married. He lied about family issues and made a deal that she could leave the baby at his parents' house whenever she went out. She started leaving the baby there almost daily. My mother-in-law, fully supporting the marriage with the mistress, agreed to take care of the baby. My mother-in-law and my husband made up the lie that the baby was mine to keep it hidden from my sister-in-law. How far were you planning to go with your lies, deceiving me, your mistress, her family, and even your dear sister? My sister-in-law was speechless, appalled. I'm sorry. My husband finally apologized to me and her. But did he think that was enough to resolve our issues? It wasn't going to be that easy. You owe an apology to more than just us. There's another family furious with you. My words made him pale. What? You don't mean? Yes, exactly that. I had already told everything to the family of his mistress. How could you lie about being single to your client's daughter? This could ruin not just your personal reputation but also your company's. No way! My husband collapsed to his knees, drained of color. Unfortunately, I'm not a liar like you. Her parents are furious. They said they're going to sue you. My husband crumbled, holding his head. Realizing he had no escape, he blurted out something unexpected. "It's not my fault. This was all Mom's order. I just followed what she said. It's not my fault. Sue this one if you're going to sue someone." I was dumbfounded by my husband's sudden shift in attitude. Blaming his mother? Wasn't it his responsibility for cheating and fathering a child? To call his own parent this one? My mother-in-law couldn't stay silent at my husband Luke's behavior. "And what do you mean my order? You're the one who came to me for advice. I've been desperately cleaning up your mess, even taking care of the baby." The ugly quarrel between them started. "Shut up. You're the one who said to leave everything to you. Now look at this mess. How are you going to take responsibility?" Luke's argument was ridiculously foolish. Take responsibility? It's you who's irresponsible for having a child with someone else in the first place. Their low-level argument seemed endless. I stepped in between them and presented Luke with divorce papers. "Let's deal with this through lawyers from now on." And with that, I left my in-laws' house. After all the help you've received, now you're blaming your mother just because it suits you? Grow up, you mama's boy. It seemed my sister-in-law had also had enough of Luke. And so the battle ended. I moved on without looking back, ready to start a new life. Later on, the divorce was finalized through our lawyers. With numerous proofs of infidelity and my testimony, I could proceed with the divorce. He agreed to pay child support monthly. My daughter showed no particular emotion about her father's absence. Having no memories with him, it wasn't surprising. Moreover, my ex-husband was sued by his mistress. His lies about being single and getting her pregnant had caused her great shock. As a result, he had to pay her a large amount in damages and child support. Left with no money for rent, Luke moved back to his parents' house. He worked day and night, juggling a day job and part-time work. But the client's president, still furious, eventually called off the deal with Luke's company. This incident spread throughout the company, and Luke lost his standing. Unable to bear the cold stares of his colleagues, he was forced to resign. With no income from the company and difficulty finding new employment, he toiled away at multiple part-time jobs. Still, his salary vanished each month, paying off me and the mistress, relying on his mother's small pension and savings for living expenses. Relying on your parents at your age, how pathetic. Find a decent job and move out quickly. Even the once close mother-son relationship deteriorated over money. Shut up. I'm working hard here. It's not like I want to be in this house. Their daily fights were relentless. The once mama's boy was nowhere to be seen. If my savings run out, we'll have to sell this house. Find a job before that happens. Disgusted with their daily arguments, his sister moved out to live on her own. Staying would only make her a target for their demands. Leaving was the smart choice. Months later, I happened to pass by Luke's house. The house I knew was demolished, and a new one stood in its place. Probably, Luke couldn't find a job after all. His sister, tired of their constant begging for money, had likely cut ties with them. No one knew where Luke's mother and Luke ended up. Post-divorce, I moved to a new area, enjoying life with my daughter. Despite being busy with work, housekeeping, and childcare, I was fulfilled. Mom, see you later. My daughter cheerfully headed out. Have a good day. I watched her leave. Now, off to work. And so, another new day began.